In this video, I will give you my final picks for UFC 300. We'll talk DraftKings, lineup construction, strategy a little bit more than we typically do, and I have some free money for you, so make sure you watch until the end. As always, you can call me Kunath. Let's make some money this week. At the time of recording this, we don't know if everybody's going to make weight. We don't know if there's going to be any last-minute cancellations. I think there might be somebody who misses weight, but we'll talk about that shortly. But realistically, I'm not all that concerned with cancellations or weight misses overall, just because this is the most talent-rich card of all time. These are professionals, these are former champions. I think everybody's good to go. Now, before we go any further, if you haven't already, watch the predictions video that was posted earlier in the week. That is a full card breakdown. I talk about these fights in greater detail. Go check that one out. This is DraftKings strategy, lineup construction, but I have some betting tips for you as well. Let's go. So we'll start with your value plays. These are plays at 8,000 and below, underdogs essentially, that you need to make your lineup work salary-wise. There are a couple that I have this week and some honorable mentions. First would be Jamahal Hill at 7,900. Sweet Dreams comes in as your co-main event underdog. Last time outscored 137 against Glover, 86 against Santos, 103 before that, 127. Outside of the Paul Craig fight, you have another 98 points against OSP. You see a no decision here because of marijuana, but he beat the guy in the first round. He would have scored 106 DraftKings points. Scratch that, 116 DraftKings points, and then 71 in his decision win prior to that. Jamahal Hill has to be in value play consideration because of his knockout upside, the fact that he's the other side of the main event, that he'll be the lesser owned side of the main event. Underdogs have performed very well this year when it comes to the title fights. The challenger has taken the belt off of the champion more than once now, and I think it happens again in this week's main event. The co-main event, I'm not so sure. Now, if you've been watching for a while, you know that I don't consume a whole lot of MMA predictions content or anything like that. I get some on like Twitter and all that, but I don't go out of my way to watch a whole lot of videos because I don't want it to skew what I'm talking about here. But I have come across countless posts now on X where people are just doubting Jamahal Hill. He's gonna get knocked out. I don't understand it at all. Jamahal Hill is younger, he's faster, he's got better hands, he's got great counter striking, better chin, better cardio, better wrestling if he needs to lean on it. And you can argue that he's coming off of the injury. He may not be the same, he may not have that same kind of explosion, but I don't think his game was really necessarily predicated on explosion. I think it was more placement, I think it was more shot selection, I think it was more accuracy. And that 1-2 down the middle that he's going to throw out of that southpaw stance is going to give Poatan problems. You've seen time and time again, Poatan get caught with a jab, what happens? His head dips off to his right, which is Sweet Dreams' left, and he's going to catch him with that left hand as he sees him dipping his head. So if he's already dipping his head off to the right, there's not really anywhere else for his head to go. So if Jamahal Hill catches him, I see him putting him down, and I don't think Poatan gets back up. I see Jamahal Hill starting fast, catching him with that 1-2, getting Pereira to move backwards, and another thing, Alex Pereira is comfortable moving backwards, letting these guys get going downhill. You don't want Jamahal Hill to do that. Jamahal Hill's going to start walking you down, and you can go on Twitter and see people share screenshots of Jamahal Hill leaving himself open as he's going to land a shot of his own. Screenshots are cool, but you're picking one moment out of the entire fight where he was out of position, and sometimes you need to put yourself out of position to land a big strike of your own. It's impossible, especially with MMA range, to be in perfect position all the time. So yes, you can take screenshots and say, look, he's leaving his right arm down. Alex Pereira can catch him with his left hook. That can happen, of course, but Pereira's not fighting a JPEG. The moments that Jamahal has done this, he's doing this against guys that have heavy hands, and none of them have been able to hurt him. So I don't think that he's doing it because he's not technically sound. He's doing it because I'm in a position where I'm going to land offense of my own, and even if they hit me with a counter shot, at the point of the fight that I'm choosing to do this, I'm fine anyway. So Jamahal Hill at 7,900, and we'll talk more about his ownership very specifically later on. I'll tell you exactly what the ownership is I project for him this week. But Jamahal Hill at 7,900 has to be in value play consideration. I recommend you be overweight to the field. Sweet Dreams wins by knockout, and at 7,900 probably shows up on the optimal lineup. The next value play is $100 cheaper with Calvin Kattar because he's fighting Aljamain Sterling this week. Aljamain Sterling has one way to win this fight and only one way. Aljo needs to get Kattar to the mat, take his back, and ride out position for 2 out of 3 rounds, and I just don't think that Calvin Kattar lets that happen. He's got outstanding takedown defense, very active with his hands. He's not going to get tired at any point in this fight, and he's going to keep a lot of volume in Aljo's face, deterring him from shooting for takedowns. Calvin Kattar's got every punch in his locker. He can throw that 1-2 down the middle. He can catch you with a counter hook on your way in. He can catch you with an uppercut while you're trying to shoot in close distance. Nobody's been able to take him down and hold him down. We've seen him taken down in the past, but nobody's been able to keep him there. And if Aljamain Sterling gets stuck on the feet here, Calvin Kattar's going to pick him apart. Now, you should have Calvin Kattar in your value play consideration, but I do recommend that you be underweight to the field as best as you can if you're running multiple lineups, because he hasn't really scored all that well. He's scoring well when he's got a first round knockout or a second round knockout, but even against Dan Ige, Gaethje, over 5 rounds, he only scores 79 in a decision win. Against Shane Burgos, he wins by knockout, he gets the knockdown, he gets the finish, but he only scores you 90 points, and then 72 points against Andre Fili. He doesn't have the same amount of time to work with as he did against Giga Chikadze. He probably doesn't knock him out in the first or second round like he did against Stevens or Lamas. I think Kattar wins this fight on the scorecards. I don't see him knocking out Aljamain Sterling. He's definitely not going to submit him, and from a DraftKings perspective, you know there's no chance that he wants to get takedowns of his own here. The mat is the last place you want to meet Sterling, so he's not going to get those 5 points for the takedowns. He's not going to get any time for control time. All he's going to do is deny the clinch, try to win the striking exchanges as best as he can, and win a decision, and for that reason, he probably only scores maybe 70 to 80 DraftKings points, somewhere in that range, and that's really not enough for me. You've got 13 fights on here and a lot of fights that can end up finishing, so I'm not too high on Calvin Kattar as a DraftKings play. As a bet, I think at plus money, Calvin Kattar makes all the sense in the world. If you want to pull the trigger on that, by all means, but you don't need too much of him in your lineups this week. If he beats you and scores 110 points somehow, then you live with it, you hold the L, but I don't think that's going to happen. In your single entry contests, stay far away from him, but Calvin Kattar is an underdog who I think is going to win and should be in your value play consideration this week. Now the next value play is of course Charles Oliveira down at 7,500. Will he be popular? Of course. But does he have all the tools to win this fight? Of course he does. And what happens when Charles Oliveira wins? It happens most of the time inside the distance. You have the first round finish over Beneil Dariush, over 100. You've got the first round submission over Justin Gaethje, over 100. Submits Dustin Poirier in the third round, 94 points. He's got the second round knockout over Chandler, 109. 91 points in a decision win over Tony Ferguson. 69 points in a submission win over Kevin Lee. You don't want that, but you'll take 104 every day of the week. You see another submission win here, 87 points, 97, 94, 96. Now he's got a tough matchup on his hands against Arman Tsarukyan. I think he's going to be at a strength disadvantage. If Tsarukyan can get the fight to the mat on his terms, I think he's going to have a lot of success not only landing his ground and pound, but staying square, staying safe, not letting Charles Oliveira throw something up off of his back or execute a sweep. But when they're on the feet and Charles Oliveira's throwing that kick right down the middle, throwing knees to the body and to the head, he's letting that long right hand go, he's letting that perfect left hook fly, that's when he could start having a lot of success, and that's when he can start walking Arman Tsarukyan down. I think that's where Tsarukyan is in a lot of trouble. We've seen Dubronx score well on DraftKings in the past. He's basically a lock for over 90 points if he does win, because it's going to be inside the first or second round. Now he's going to be very popular, so if you're trying to play the ownership game, be weary of Charles Oliveira, because a lot of people are going to click this button at 7,500, rightfully so. Especially the bigger the contest, the more you're going to see people play Charles Oliveira. But it's hard to argue with the process because Charles Oliveira is a monster. So don't be surprised when Charles Oliveira goes out there, wins in the first or second round, shows up on the optimal lineup even at high ownership. He is good chalk this week. You should be playing him in your lineups. Another guy who's going to be good chalk this week is Max Blessed Holloway, because let me tell you, born to fight, hard to kill. The more I look at this fight, the more I feel like Max Holloway is going to win, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happened inside the distance. But even if it doesn't, we've seen Max Holloway go the distance, and that's when he's putting up his highest DraftKings scores. You look at this fight against Calvin Kattar, less than 30 seconds of control time, not a single takedown, not a single knockdown, not a single reversal. But because of his crazy high striking output, he posts the highest DraftKings score you have ever seen at 209 points. To put that into perspective for you, his salary could have been 17, 18,000 that day, and he would have been worth the money. Max Holloway has the highest scoring ceiling of anybody on the slate, anybody in the UFC, period. He's the only man that can break a slate with just his striking, primarily his boxing, and luckily for us, he's got 5 rounds to work this week against the most hittable target in the division. And what's funny is Justin Gaethje is very hittable, but it's not like he has bad striking defense, which might sound counterintuitive, but walk with me for a second. Justin Gaethje moves really well. You watch that second fight against Dustin Poirier, he did a very good job of angling off when Dustin decided to blitz forward. Justin Gaethje has very underrated lateral movement. When he decides to jump into the pocket, he dips his head while throwing a hook. It acts almost as a shield and a sword at the same time while he's getting out of harm's way. So his defense isn't bad, he just gets hit a lot because he doesn't care, it doesn't bother him. We've seen him rocked before, we've seen him finished in all 4 of his UFC losses, which are all 4 of his career losses, but for the most part, we've seen him go to war and he just keeps on going. He gets wobbly sometimes, the legs get a bit shaky sometimes, he's rocked of course, but not as many people are able to recover the way that Justin Gaethje does, not as many people are able to fight rocked the way that he does. So he's been able to make a career out of that. But again, I say all that to say this, his striking defense isn't bad, but he is very hittable. But for Holloway, where I see him having the most success is I think his hand speed and his output are really going to surprise Gaethje, and I think we're going to see him do a great job of adjusting to the tendency that Justin Gaethje has fallen in over the last couple of years. You go back and you watch Justin Gaethje's fights, he's throwing that left hook on the break damn near every time, and that might be a break of the clinch, that might be a break of just distance if the guys get close, that also might just be at the end of a combination. He's either going to throw a leg kick or he's going to throw that left hook off the combination. It happens all the time. Holloway's going to pick up on that, and I assume he's going to pick up on it pretty early, mostly because if I can see it, I'm sure that he and his team can see it on film. Max Holloway's going to eat a couple of these hooks. He's going to block a couple of them, but there's going to come a point in this fight where Holloway's letting a combination go, and then he sees that left hook coming. He's either going to pull or he's going to dip, but either way, he's going to avoid this shot and land a huge counter shot of his own. And we can ask him, Max, what do you do with the pressure when somebody is hurt?
Turn it up.
That's what I'm trying to tell him. Just like Charles Oliveira, when there's blood in the water, Max Holloway is letting it all hang out, and Justin Gaethje has been hurt before, so I think that Max Holloway packs him up in like the third, fourth, or fifth round, finishes him, scores really well on DraftKings because he's going to land north of 150 strikes or whatever the case may be, and even if he doesn't, we know that he can reach that scoring ceiling in a decision win. So Max Bless Holloway has to be somebody in your value play consideration. He's one of my favorite underdogs, which sounds stupid. He's one of the underdogs that I like the most this week. Now I have two more value plays for you. One of them, I don't know which one of them, but one of them is going to break the slate. Before I give them to you, if you don't mind, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, all free ways to support the channel. It's really appreciated. Now, if you watch the predictions video, you know that I don't feel all that strongly about Money Moicano this week. I love me some Money Moicano, but I think that he's up against it. Xiaonan, typically when you're looking at these title fights, we've talked about this before, there's a video on the channel about it. If you haven't seen it, the thumbnail's green, it says the truth. There is a lot of merit to always betting on the challenger against the defending champion. So if you want to bet on her this week, fine. If you want her in your DraftKings lineup because she has 5 rounds to work and she's a good striker, you can do that too, but she's not one of the two. Holm is actually somebody that I like to win this fight. I know that I'm probably on an island here, but I think that Holm has a more well-rounded skill set. She's a better striker. Her body's more acclimated to the weight class. She's great at defending takedowns, especially against somebody like Kayla Harrison who wants to throw her. And I'm not certain that Kayla Harrison makes weight. Even if she does make weight, you have to think she's been fighting at 155 pounds. She's been physically dominant. Now you take that physical dominance away because not too many people are muscling Holm, even at 42 years old. Kayla Harrison has to go through an entire body recomposition to be able to get her frame to a point where it's even possible for her to start cutting down to 135. Holm is a consummate professional. Always ready, always on weight, always going to give you her best effort, and always in shape. So I'm not too worried about Holm this week. I think that she actually gets it done. If she gets it done on the scorecards, historically she hasn't scored that well, so she's not one of the two, so that only leaves two. The first is Cody Garbrandt, who I actually like more out of the two. Cody Garbrandt down at 7,100 seems like a steal. The former champion's getting some momentum back. 2 wins in a row, coming off of a knockout win in the first round, which is vintage no love. Cody Garbrandt's a natural 135er. He's the younger man. He's going to be the bigger man in there. And one thing that I feel like a lot of us are overlooking, it's easy to get wrapped up in the whole Cody's been knocked down, Cody's been knocked out a whole lot thing. Deiveson Figueiredo's got big power. Do we know if he's got big power at 135? His power was clearly a separator at flyweight, but do we know if he's got that big one-shot power that's just going to stun Cody and put him out early? I don't know if that's the case. We know that Cody Garbrandt's got a ton of power at 135 pounds. Just look at the amount of knockdowns the guy has. Like, the guy had like a Josh Emmett knockdown rate. So we know Cody's got a ton of power. And let me just close this and go up to Deiveson Figueiredo so we can look at the guys that he's been fighting. Rob Font, not known for his power. The rest of these guys are flyweights. So stop me when we see the power puncher. Brandon Moreno 4 times. Alex Perez, Joe B, Tim Elliott, Alessandro Pantoja, Jussier Formiga, John Moraga. You come down here and you start to realize, like, okay, maybe the guy is not facing the biggest punchers he's ever seen. Maybe the guy still, even at 135 pounds, is not going to have the best weight cut in the world. Another thing we can take from this as I open it back up, you start to look at these takedown numbers. 4 against Rob Font, 1 against Moreno, 2, 1, 2, 0 here with the first round submission in a fight that ended pretty quickly. First round submission over Tim Elliott, 2 against Pantoja, lost to Jussier Formiga by decision, 2 against Moraga, 2 against Morales, 1 against Brooks. So you start to think, hold on, Cody Garbrandt has faced prime TJ Dillashaw. He's faced Dominic Cruz. He's faced elite wrestlers, elite MMA wrestlers that are bigger than Deiveson Figueiredo, and he walked away from it with an 80% takedown defense. Maybe not get the takedowns that he's looking for, or maybe eat a big shot from Cody No Love in the early stages. There's a chance that we see Cody Garbrandt catch him, and we notice Deiveson Figueiredo respond like he's never responded before. This is a different type of power that he's up against this week, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on Cody Garbrandt to the point where I am changing my prediction from Deiveson Figueiredo to Cody Garbrandt to win this fight, because I think that the path to victory is there. You go back and you rewatch that fight with Deiveson Figueiredo and Rob Font, you take those takedowns away, things start to get a bit different. At range, there were lots of opportunities for Rob Font to land, and I would argue that Cody Garbrandt's a little bit cleaner than Rob Font. He's definitely faster and hits way harder. So I think that he's going to give Deiveson Figueiredo a lot of trouble. I think that he's in prime position to break the slate with a first or second round knockout. Again, to get a former champion down at 7,100 against a guy who is just now starting in the weight class at 36 years old, the writing is on the wall. I changed my pick. I think that Cody No Love wins by knockout. And the last value play, who I have significantly less confidence in, the last, I should say, honorable mention value play would be the other Cody Brundage. The reason why you need to consider him this week is because, one, the ownership is extremely low. Two, and more importantly, if he does win, it's going to be in the first round, and it's going to be pretty early. Brundage has really two paths to victory here. One, a shot that rocks Bo Nickal, knocks him out in the first round, and it's one of the earliest strikes that Brundage throws. Maybe one of the first 5. So the quick win finish is there. If he wins, it's going to be in the first minute if it's by knockout. You can also argue the other way that he could win is by submission, specifically a guillotine, because Cody Brundage is looking for that guillotine all the time. You look at his fight against Shadrikas Dumas, he's looking for every chance that he gets. Who am I to argue with a man who was confident enough to jump Gilly on Rodolfo Vieira of all people? So he's going to try it this week, and who knows, maybe it works. You hear these stories about Bo Nickal rolling with people, jiu-jitsu people, and just destroying them. Okay, cool. Bo Nickal probably wins. He's a minus 2,000 favorite. I'm not saying that Cody Brundage is a lock. I'm not feeling very good about Cody Brundage, but DraftKings is about playing the people you don't feel good about, because no one feels good about them. They come in at low ownership, they overperform versus expectation, they end up breaking the slate, and the people that had the balls to click that button are the ones that are winning. Again, Bo Nickal is an elite wrestler. He tells the stories about being able to just ragdoll jiu-jitsu guys, whatever the case may be. You saw him fight Jamie Pickett. You watched as he had an arm triangle fully cinched up and could not finish it for north of a minute, north of 60 seconds. The reason he took him so long to finish it was because he was just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing without even getting in the proper position. He seemed like he was up too high, wasn't off to the side enough. You have to lay next to the guy, essentially. We see guys hit arm triangles all the time. You want to get your chest to the mat to eliminate that space. We saw Jamie Pickett hanging out like this for a long time and really doing nothing to fight the choke. It was as if he was waiting for the choke to get on the blood so he could say, okay, I'm out of there. But you just saw Bo Nickal squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, being in a terrible position. Really, it shouldn't have worked. That performance overall, very sloppy. The outcome is good. 100% finish rate, stays undefeated, beats a UFC veteran, all great things. But who knows, if Cody Brundage is able to actually cinch up a guillotine while they're still dry in a good position, it might get dark quick down there. So I'm not saying you have to be super confident in it. I'm not saying you have to be super overweight to the field, because we're projecting Cody Brundage to come in at sub 10%, closer to around 5% ownership. So if you want to be double overweight to the field, put him in 10, 11% of your lineups if you run 150 lineups. So there you go. That's all you need to do. But that'll do it for the value plays. If you want to be able to use these value plays, plug them into a lineup optimizer, be able to see the DraftKings strategy guide where we go over the cash game plays of the week, the tournament plays of the week, which we'll build lineups for in just a few minutes. You can visit KUNATH'MMA.com. This is the home page. You can go right up here to plans, and you can choose the plan that works best for you. If you run a whole lot of DraftKings lineups and you want a tool to generate better lineups, one that you can manipulate, full of projections, make projections of your own, set rules however you want, and help cook up better lineups in a shorter amount of time, you can grab a lineup optimizer for just $5.99, or you can get the lineup optimizer and everything else with the total access package that's on the right hand side for $24.99. That will include the official betting article of the week. We have 9 bets going out this week. This will also give you access to the community forum where I'm going to be putting the parlay for the week. For DFS, you get the strategy guide, lineup optimizer, data model, projections as well. All of that could be had on KUNATH'MMA.com. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Now we can get into building some cash game lineups. So this will be for your 50-50s, your head-to-heads, your double-ups, any contest that you're in where you can double your money if you come in the top 50% of the field once the contest is over. You don't need to score a ridiculous amount of points, but you do need to beat 50% of the field. So what we're looking for is the best scoring floor possible. Now for the main event, I would not recommend you stack it this week. Stacking fights means you're playing both sides of the matchup, so you're going to have a guaranteed winner and a guaranteed loser, but you hope that the loser scores well. Since we have light heavyweights in the main event, 2 heavy-handed light heavyweights at that, I don't expect that fight to go over 2 rounds. So for that reason, I would recommend you not stack the main event. For the co-main event, I think there's a chance that it's one-way traffic for Zhang Weili, so I wouldn't stack that either. That leaves us with the other 5-round fight that is extremely stackable. You get a very hittable target with good output, and you get a very hittable target with good output on both sides. So you're going to stack the BMF title fight, of course. You've got Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway there. You're left with 84.50 left over per fighter. So now you want to grab your punt play. Now your punt play is going to be an inexpensive piece that you want to put into your lineups in a fight that is either going to get extended beyond 2 rounds or they have a chance to win. If those are 2 things that can happen, then of course that's one of the better punt plays. But I think Xiaonan makes for a decent punt play this week. If she hangs in there tough, lets her hands go, lands a good amount of strikes, and just makes it competitive over 5 rounds, even if it's competitive for 3 rounds down at 7,000, feels like one of the better punt plays of the week. 89.93 left over. I'd probably come up here and grab somebody like Jalin Turner, who I feel good about. I feel really good about Bobby Green. And now you have 9,300 left over. If you want to grab Kayla Harrison, by all means. I know a lot of you think that she's going to go out there, submit Holly Holm in the first round. Never has happened in Holly Holm's career, but hey, if you want that to be where you hang your hat, then sure. Personally, I won't be there. If anything, you can come right here to Zhang Weili. You are kind of limiting yourself if you do it this way, because the best you can do is those 4 winners. You want to strive for 5 as best as you can, but I don't think this is terrible given the way that all of these fights will end up shaking out. If Bobby Green wins, Jalin Turner gets a finish, you're going to get a guaranteed winner here and a guaranteed winner here. So realistically, your lineup is going to depend on these 2 guys getting it done, and I feel good about both of them given their matchup. So give me Jalin Turner, give me Bobby Green. If you want to plug this into your cash games or something like this, totally fine. But those are for your cash games. Now we're going to talk tournaments, and I'm going to take a second here to talk about ownership. Now there are timestamps below, so if you want to skip this and just get to the tournament lineups, I will timestamp that here. But I want to talk to you a little bit about ownership. I know some of you are happy when I talk game theory stuff, and this is something that I just wanted to share with you at this event specifically. Reason being is I feel a lot of people are going to watch this, and also with it being UFC 300, it's something you'll remember. So if you ever want to come back to this and hear me talk about this specific thing, you'll be able to revisit this video for whenever you feel like you need a refresher. So let's talk a little bit about ownership. So if you're watching the video, you know what ownership is. If somebody is in a contest of 100 people and 50 of those 100 people have fighter X, that means that fighter's coming in at 50% ownership. You know what ownership is. As a content creator and somebody that provides tools, what we have to do is project ownership to put into the tools and to help you get an edge over the field. So when projecting ownership, I want you to understand this. Each contest is going to come with different ownership. So your single entry contest, your 20 max, your 150 max, those are all going to have varying levels of ownership. Fighters will not be the same amount in every contest. So when we're projecting ownership, what we do is try to project ownership for the biggest contest, which in this case is the 200,000 to first, $30 to enter. There's over 30,000 entries in the field. That is where the ownership projection comes from, is that contest there. So I just want to share with you a little bit about what I've noticed, a trend or trends from the last 4 events, basically the last month worth of UFC events. So for main event ownership, this is important. Personally, I've been over projecting the main event, specifically the favorites for the main event. So a lot of the times, like if you have the tools on the website, you'll notice that I had, for example, like Brendan Allen, I had Brendan Allen at 55% ownership. And around that number has been consistent when it comes to projecting the main event ownership for us. But when I look back at the last 4 events after the dust settles and you download the information, find out what the true ownership looked like, I noticed that there was not a single fighter that was over 50% owned in the big contest. Now, this could be true in other contests, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but in the biggest contests, no fighter was over 50% owned. To go a step further, when you look at the main event total ownership, so fighter A and fighter B, both sides of the main event, if you add their ownership together and you do that over 4 events and then you divide it by the number of events, typically they're accounting for about a combined ownership of 73%. Now, last week, my projection for Chris Curtis's ownership came back at 38%, but the true ownership was 32%. So I was 6% off. That's a solid projection. But I projected Brendan Allen at 55% when he only came in at 47%. That's 8% off. It's not horrible, but there's still a lot of room to improve, obviously. And we did well with other fighters. To give you a few examples, I had Dylan Budka, who I projected for 22% ownership. He came back at 21.5. That's as good as it gets. Same with Christos Yagos. We projected him for 12%. He came back just over 11%, which is very good. We've got Pedro Falcao, projected him for 21%, came back at 19%. Norma Dumont, we had her projected for just under 10%. She came in right at 11%. Fantastic. So we've done really well in spots, but there are also spots that we know that we can improve, because if we improve the main event ownership, then we can also improve the other ownership. So those handful of fighters that I just pointed to, we can start to make all of the fighters look like that by understanding the difference of where we are at versus where we want to go. So we can tweak our process a little bit. So I'm going to give you what I believe Alex Pereira and Jamahal Hill's ownership will be this week. The ownership numbers that I have for these guys, Alex Pereira, I have him projected at about 43% ownership of the big contest this week, while Jamahal Hill, I have him at 36% of the big contest this week. So combined, we're looking at 79%. And we're striving to be under 80%, because I believe being between 70 and 80% will be that sweet spot. Again, the average for the last 4 events came back at around 73%, but also the Rose Namajunas Amanda Hebos main event was a real low one. That was in the 60s. But I see this one being just south of 80%, because a lot of people are going to want to pick Alex Pereira. A lot of people are going to want to pick Jamahal Hill. The likelihood of this fight going under is very high, and it's at the top of the card. So I think that's a fair projection. So again, 43% for the champ, 36% for the challenger. Now again, when we're projecting the ownership, what we're looking at is what the outcome is going to look like in the biggest contest, okay? So we can't project ownership for every single entry contest or your cash games. That would just be impossible, way too much work. But we can use what we know about these trends to get a better idea of what the ownership will look like in these other contests. So let me explain. You should expect the ownership in the biggest contest to be a bit flatter. So you have like single digit ownership fighters. You might have 1 or 2 of them. After that, you're going to have a few that are in the teens, but then there's going to be the bulk of the fighters. Most of the fighters on the card are going to fall between 20 and 40%, south of 40. So in that 20 to 30 range is where you're going to find most of the fighters. And then you're going to get 1, which is normally the main event favorite, maybe 2 fighters that are going to be over 40%, but under 50%. So what that means is that the ownership as you go up the card from lowest owned to highest owned is going to be on a little bit of an incline like this. It's not completely flat, but it's a lot flatter compared to what you're going to get with the single entry contest, because with the single entry contest, what I've found is that the numbers are basically amplified. So when you're looking in the big contest, if a fighter is lower owned in the single entry contest, there's a good chance they're going to be even lower owned than that. Versus the fighters who are already highly owned in the big contest, they're going to be even more owned in the single entry contest. And I'll give you an example just from last week. In the biggest contest, Brendan Allen was 47% owned, but in a single entry contest, he came back at over 66% owned. 2/3 of the field had him versus less than half. You'll also notice that in this same contest, when you looked at the big contest, there were only 2 fighters that had single digit ownership, but there were 4 fighters who had single digit ownership when it came to the single entry contest. So now you keep these things in mind. When you're looking at ownership projections, understand that the ownership projection is largely based off of the biggest contest possible. So if you play the big contest, use your ownership projection wherever you get it from, whether it's mine or somewhere else, whatever. And understand how that's going to be amplified when you're playing your single entry contest. It's important to start thinking of ownership like this because of a few reasons. First, ownership is everything. You want to try your best to get as different as possible because you don't want to win and then split the winnings a bunch of different ways. You want to create a lineup where you are either winning it all or you're on an island by yourself and you probably didn't win that much. 2, there are many people who just go and do this for fun, which that's why we're all doing it. It's fun, but a lot of people just open up the Draftkings app and just start clicking. And it's fine if you want to go there and click just so you're watching the fights, but for a certain type of person, if you're just losing over and over again, it's going to bother you. And you're going to seek ways to improve your process. And this is one way that you can really improve your process, just thinking about ownership on a deeper level. Because I'm telling you right now, if you're playing this game each and every week, there are people that you are competing with every time who are thinking about the ownership on a deeper level than you might be. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, game, but if you've been playing DraftKings for years now, if you've been playing DraftKings MMA specifically for years now, you probably understand ownership, but on a very shallow level, if that makes sense. But go back and listen to this from the start. Go get yourself some tools if you don't have some. They don't need to be mine. If you want them to be mine, great, then Oscar gets to eat. But if they're not mine, it's not the end of the world. Get yourself some tools so you can start learning, so you can start being competitive, because it's a battlefield out there, man. And when you're going into battle, information is your best friend. You want to know if you're fighting a militia of 20 or an army of 200. You want to know what the terrain is like. You want to know if you're going to be fighting in the day or in the night. You want to know what the weather is like. You want to have as much information as possible. And if you continue to just be a bot, then you can think of it as these people each week that are thinking about this deeper than you are, just picking that money out of your account and placing it into theirs. You don't want that. Last thing I'll say about this, and then we can build some tournament lineups. Think about it this way. Would you rather walk through the dark with a flashlight or night vision goggles? I think the choice is obvious. So do your best to get as much information as possible. Just a little ownership stuff that I wanted to talk about. If that didn't make sense, go back and listen again. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of how I'm trying to improve my process, and hopefully how you can improve your process by understanding what you're looking at a bit more. But now we can build some tournament lineups. So let's start with some of the tournament lineups. It's really hard to not want to play pieces of the 5-round fights, especially because you have Zhang Weili, who scored 191 points last time out. Crazy. And she's got a huge grappling advantage this week. And I don't think that she's going to give Xiaonan the type of fight that she wants. Xiaonan is somebody who is going to be able to strike with her. Zhang Weili is a great striker, lots of power, great speed, very athletic, but that's the only way that Xiaonan wins this fight. Zhang Weili is also very disciplined, and she's going to take the path of least resistance. So expect her to take Xiaonan down each and every round until she submits her at some point, which I think probably happens here. Jamahal Hill, other side of the main event that I like this week. Other side of the BMF fight that I like this week is Max Holloway. This is chalky, but this is good chalk. Even if you switched it around and you took Pereira and you took Justin Gaethje, this is a good starting point. I am very confident that the best lineups are going to have the winners of the last 3 fights of the night on them. Can it shake out differently? Of course, and that's going to help you from an ownership standpoint. If you didn't play any of these fighters and you decided, you know what, I'm going to take Jalin Turner, I'm going to come up here and grab Kayla Harrison, I'm going to come down here and grab somebody like Cody Garbrandt, do Bronx, you've got Calvin Kattar, maybe 9,400 left over per fighter. You might come here to somebody like Bobby Green, left 800 salary on the table. If you want to get weird as hell, this is how you get weird as hell. And there's merit to this, man, I promise you that. But again, I'm very confident that the winner of the last 3 fights, or the winners of the last 3 fights, are going to be the ones that show up on the optimal lineup. So let's build a few that look like that first. And I'm going to go with my 3 preferred sides, which again, Zhang Weili, Jamahal Hill, Max Blessed. 8,500 left over per fighter. We can come down here, grab somebody like Do Bronx. When I tell you this is chalk zone, is where you'd be living if you ran with this. It is, but you've also got the upside. 5 rounds, 5 rounds, 5 rounds. Charles Oliveira, first round. 9,000 left over. People are going to come up here. I think that Jalin Turner is somebody who should be on your radar this week. He's going to be very popular though. Deuce de Gaethje, he's coming in at 9,100. Take him out, put somebody else in that you feel a little bit better about. Maybe Bobby Green again. Maybe you wanted Aljamain Sterling. You feel like he could take his back, submit him in the first round like he did to Corey Sandhagen. That's not impossible. Aljo is gonna do it. If anybody's gonna do it, it's gonna be Sterling. You can take these guys out. We'll rebuild with the 3 that we have already in there. Those will be kind of our pillar pieces as we click through. You got Marina Rodriguez there at 8,100. I think she's extremely sneaky this week. She put up 111 last time out. She did get a takedown. I don't know if she takes Jessica Andrade down, but I think she can knock her out, and I think she could do it in the first round. 8,700 left over. You can grab Diego Lopes. 8,900 left over, and this is kind of the range that you fall. If you wanted to grab Jalin Turner again, by all means. Bobby Green looks great this week to me. If you wanted to go with Rakić, that's cool. I'm not really all that high on Rakić. When you start looking at the scores that he's produced, not really jumping off the page at all. You get the back-to-back first-round knockouts over Manawa, Devin Clark. That's cool, but Volkan Oezdemir doesn't beat him, even though he beat him. But even so, add 30 points to that, 72 points. Doesn't break 100 against Anthony Smith. 52 points in a win against Santos. Just not great. So if you take Rakić out, again, 8,900, you could do pretty much whatever you want. Now, you're going to go against the grain this week if you have this much left over, and instead of going with somebody like Jalin Turner, you forego the favorites and you come and you grab yourself another underdog. In this case, you grab a chalky do Bronx. There's nothing chalky, however, about leaving 1,400 salary on the table. Now, is there? And just a weird little bit of history, we look at Jamahal Hill. I think it was the time that he fought Jimmy Crute. This might have been the card where the dogs just barked so hard. It was because he was a dog against Jimmy Crute, which is absurd. I even picked against him there, and that's something that haunts me to this day because I've never picked against Jamahal Hill outside of that fight, and it was kind of ridiculous that I did in hindsight. But I remember this one where I think this was the card where at the end of the night, the optimal lineup did not win in the tournament. The winning lineup was different than the optimal lineup, and the optimal lineup, I believe, was the night that 3,200 salary left on the table would have given you the best lineup. Now, let's say you wanted to go with other sides of those matchups. Let's say you wanted to go with Justin Gaethje. I don't think we have the cream to do that. Oh, we do. 8,800. There you go. Let's say you wanted to go with Poatan. Now we just have to make some changes here. So we come off of Diego Lopes. Let's come off of Marina Rodriguez as well. 8,100 left over per fighter. You want to go with Jim Miller, that's cool. You look at Jim Miller lately, 3rd round sub, 1st round KO, 2nd round sub, 2nd round KO. The guy's a finishing machine. But I just think that he's up against it this week. 8,600 left over, but again, we'll come down here. We'll grab somebody like Cody Brundage, left nearly 2,000 salary on the table. If you think that people have the balls for a pay-per-view card with all these champions on it, UFC 300, to leave 1,900 salary on the table, you're out of your mind. People are way too afraid to do this. So let's say you blow that up and you want to go with Cody Garbrandt, Charles Oliveira. Now that you know that about 79% of the field most likely is going to be taking one side of the main event, maybe you don't want any part of the main event. Maybe the main event ends by knockout in the 3rd round after a slow first 2 rounds, and the winner of that fight scores you 80 points. Certainly not out of the realm of possibility. So let's not put the main event winner in there and see what we got, but let's of course show our respect to Zhang Weili. Let's go grab Charles Oliveira, or rather Max Holloway. I think I wanted to grab Max Holloway, but I put do Bronx in there, but that's okay. We've got 9,400 left over. You could go back to back right at the top here if you wanted to leave no salary left over. I'm not upset by that at all. That will do it for the tournament lineups. Again, if you want the tools to build better lineups in your tournaments, DFS strategy guide. If you want to offset some of your DFS deposits, if you will, with bets on your sports book, there's the official betting article there that I feel very good about this week. We're going prop hunting this week, so check it out if you haven't already. And also, if you haven't, if you're watching this, it might be too late, it might not be, but go on KUNATH'SMMA.com, put your information in there to get free bets. I'm going to send you the prop of the week. It's the prop that we like at the biggest odds. I'm sending 2 of them this week. And we'll wrap things up with Underdog Fantasy. This is the free money that I have for you because Underdog Fantasy is going to match your first deposit up to $100 when you use promo code KUNATH or use the link that will be in the description and in a pinned comment. And I have 5 separate picks for you that I'm going to explain all of them to you right now. You look at Max Holloway. In Max Holloway's last 8 or 9 fights, he's gone over 120 significant strikes in 9 of them. It was actually 9 out of his last 11, excuse me. And again, he has the most hittable target in the division in front of him this week in what should be a war. So Max Holloway, I haven't projected for way more than 119 and a half significant strikes. So we're going to go higher there. For Aleksandar Rakić, we're going to go with over 10 minutes of fight time. Jiří Procházka went nearly 10 minutes with Alex Pereira, who's caught in the last minute or so of the 2nd round. So that was almost 10 minutes. And then against Glover Teixeira, nearly went the whole 25. Aleksandar Rakić, very tough, not likely to get knocked out, and more of a fight manager than a fight finisher, especially against somebody like Jiří Procházka. Most of Rakic's UFC fights have gone the distance. Definitely going to go over 10 minutes there. I take the higher. As soon as you get into the 3rd round, you win. Bobby Green, 70 and a half significant strikes. He lands that before he gets out of bed in the morning. So I definitely like him to be higher there. I like the lower for Jamahal Hill on 46 and a half. Again, I don't think this fight goes beyond 2 rounds. One of these guys wins by knockout early in this one. And if that's the case, we've seen Jamahal Hill go way under that number with 1st or 2nd round finishes. And then for Zhang Weili, I like her to finish this fight either by TKO from a dominant position on the ground or by submission. If you want to take her by submission, it's going to give you better odds on here and on your sports book, but I'm just going to go with the finish because I got burned a couple of weeks ago by not going with the Yusuff Zalal finish. I took him by knockout instead. Had I taken him by finish, I would have hit at times 100 multiplier, which pisses me off, but that's okay. We're going to take these 5, we're going to put them in there at 21x. We're going to put, say, $35 on it to win $735. There you have it. We have higher on strikes, fight time, and finishes for those 4, then lower on strikes for Jamahal Hill, $35 to win $735. You can get a free $35 to make that entry. You can get a free $100 to make that entry by signing up with Underdog, making your first deposit, doing that through my link or using promo code KUNATH when you check out for the first time. They'll match that first deposit, give you money to play with, and then you can burn them for it by winning right in their face. So you can do that. You could take insurance as well. I'm not going to take the insurance though, let's be real. But that'll do it for a historical UFC 300. I wish you all the best of luck. I will see you in 2 weeks when the UFC returns after we catch our breath for what should be a banger of an event. Thank you guys so much for watching. We broke 7,000 subscribers. We're on 10K's ass, and I can't appreciate you guys enough. So thank you for all that you do. Best of luck. Have fun. Be safe. Let's go.